The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, July 21st. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the DDA. We welcome you to the DDA Self-Direction Webinar Updates. Before we begin, just like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options to hear the webinar, by computer and by phone. And if you look at the panel interface on your right, there's a section labeled audio. You can click on the computer or phone to switch for your best option. We have two handouts in the platform, and that's in the handout section. And we are recording the webinar, and that will be posted on the DDA website and on YouTube. We may have time for questions later, but please do put your questions in the chat box. We are interested in hearing from you. So on the panel today, we have Rhonda Workman, Director of Federal Programs, Patricia Sestoki, Director of Programs, and Kristi Culbreth, Coordinator of Self-Direction. And I'm just going to welcome everyone. And I think, Rhonda, are you on? Are you starting?
Yes, Donna, thank you. Thank you for introducing our webinar today, so appreciate that. First of all, we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Kristi and I are very excited about the opportunity to meet with you today and share some updates about self-directed services. Can you go to the next slide, please, Donna? Thank you. So here's our agenda today. It includes a discussion about the definition of fiscal management and counseling services. We're going to provide an overview of the enhanced supports for fiscal management counseling services that will be provided to participants. We're going to look at the agencies and the participants' rights to choose one. We're going to provide an overview of our open enrollment process. You may recall that the DDA had shared some communication about an open enrollment and information fairs. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those today. We're going to review updates to the self-directed budget sheet, in addition to some additional updates related to person-centered planning and the budget modification process, and some of the options that we're adding for more flexibility for participants. We're also going to look into discussions about our summer self-directed services lunch and learn and give you some details about that. And then before we conclude today, we're going to also conduct a poll so we can get some information from you in terms of those lunch and learns and topics that you'd like us to prioritize. As Donna shared, this webinar is being recorded so that you can review the information and so that others who were unable to join us today can also have the opportunity to hear the information. We are going to touch on some key highlights in our guidance, and the guidance, as Donna has mentioned, is included in the handout section and is being posted to the DDA website. Kristi will also be sharing that information related to our budget sheet and lunch and learns. And again, we appreciate you joining us today. Next slide, please. So let's start with some overview of fiscal management and counseling services. Next slide, please. So fiscal management counseling services, today we'll start to refer to them as FMCSs, assist people and their teams with employer and budget authority related to self-direction. The FMCS agencies will help check that the employees and vendors selected by the participant meets the requirements as outlined in the program, like clearing background checks and certain certifications, so that they can work and help people and their teams by reminding them when certificates or certifications and trainings are due. They pay employees and vendors on behalf of the participant, and they will also provide reports and statements to help participants and their teams keep track of budget spending. And they also complete tax paperwork for participants, their employees, and vendors. So in other words, they're going to continue to provide the same services of fiscal management services that have been provided under the DDA self-directed services programs, but also they're going to be able to provide some enhanced and best practices. Next slide, please. So this slide shares some information about some of those enhancements. Again, they will perform the same tasks and activities as the current fiscal management agencies, but they're also going to provide new opportunities, including web portals with real-time reports. So web portal is like a place that you can go through the internet to really view information related to your services, your budgets, and your monthly statements. Participants, along with their teams, for which they provide access to, can log on at any time to check on their budget spending. The new FMS services will include online, phone, and in-person customer services, including a response to questions in one business day. They're also going to be providing information about applications that can be used on your smartphone or tablet for use for timekeeping and approval and potentially invoices. And they also have access to multiple language and other accessibility features to make sure that they're able to provide the best customer services to you. Next slide, please. So now let's start to talk about the choice, open enrollment, and information fairs. Next slide, please. So as we've already communicated, Maryland has selected fiscal management counseling service agencies. They include GT Independence, Public Partnership, LLC, and the ARC of Central Chesapeake Region. The department is reviewing these FMCS agencies' websites to ensure information and accessibility meets requirements. Once we confirm this information, we will include on the DDA's new dedicated FMCS webpage links to the new FMCS's websites so that you can easily access information. Next slide, please. It's important to note that every participant who currently self-directs will choose an FMCS in a process called open enrollment. Participants who choose to self-direct in the future, let's say beginning in August 1st, will choose an FMS agency during the person-centered planning process. We encourage all participants and stakeholders interested in self-directed services to learn more about the great opportunities and choices available under this model. I am now going to turn it over to Kristi to talk more about the open enrollment process. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be reviewing the open enrollment process for participants who are currently self-directing. There are 3 steps to open enrollment. Learn as much as you can about each FMCS agency. Choose an FMCS, and then take action steps to transition to your new FMCS. We'll review all 3 steps together today. Open enrollment for FMCSs begins on August 1st, 2022, and will go through November 15th, 2022. If a participant or their legal guardian or designated representative does not choose an FMCS by November 15th, one will be chosen for them. It is important to note that if a person is currently using the ARC Central Chesapeake as their agency, they will still need to choose an FMCS agency during open enrollment. They may choose any of the 3 FMCSs, including the ARC CCR. Next slide. The first step in open enrollment is to learn about the new FMCS agencies. The DDA is holding informational fairs virtually and in person to help people learn more about each FMCS agency. Participants, family members, coordinators of community service, support brokers, employees of participants, vendors, providers, and other self-directed stakeholders are all invited to attend the informational fairs. The fairs will give everyone in attendance the opportunity to hear from each FMCS and ask them their specific questions. DDA staff from the regional offices and headquarters will be available to answer any questions regarding the FMS transition as well. The virtual fairs will have portions recorded for those who are not able to attend. And all of the fairs will have an afternoon and evening session so that teams can choose what's most convenient for them. Next slide. Our August informational fairs are scheduled. The fairs will have a kickoff on August 1st with our first virtual fair. Then each week in August, we'll meet in a different region of Maryland. On Thursday, August 4th, we'll meet in the Eastern region at the Holiday Inn Express in Easton. On Thursday, August 11th, we'll meet in the Central region at the Owen Brown Interfaith Center in Columbia. On Wednesday, August 17th, we'll meet in the Western region at the Ramada Inn in Hagerstown. And on Tuesday, August 23rd, we'll meet in the Southern region at the Comfort Inn Conference Center in Bowie. This presentation includes the links to register for each of these informational fairs, and the addresses to all of these locations are available in the registration pages. When you register, you'll also receive an email with this information. Next slide. The next step in open enrollment is to choose an FMCS. When a participant or their legal guardian or designated representative decides on an FMCS agency, they must tell their coordinator of community service. The CCS will confirm their choice and complete the FMCS participant choice form. This form will help the DDA to track who has made a choice. We will also follow up with teams on November 1st if we have not received any information. Next slide. Now we'll spend some time reviewing the FMCS participant choice form and the LTSS Maryland service referral process. Next slide. It's important to note again that the FMCS participant choice form is completed after the CCS confirms the participant's FMCS choice. The CCS does not choose the FMCS for the participant and their team. Section 1 of the choice form is personal information. The CCS will type their own work email address. A copy of the completed form will be emailed to them. They are then responsible to send a copy to the participant and to upload the form to LTSS. Next, the CCS types the participant's name and the LTSS client ID number. Next slide. Section 2 is where the CCS notes the participant's FMCS choice between GT Independence, Public Partnerships LLC, and the ARC Central Chesapeake region. Next slide. Section 3 is the participant's choice of effective dates. Participants who are currently self-directing may choose to start their new FMCS services on October 1st, 2022 or January 1st, 2023. Choosing an effective date gives the participant and the team time to meet and transition with their new FMCS. The October and January 1st dates are both at the beginning of a tax quarter, making the transition as simple as possible for participants, employees, and vendors. Next slide. The last section of the choice form is an attestation. The CCS must attest that the participant or a legal guardian or designated representative has made an informed decision. The CCS must not complete the form without ensuring the participant's choice. After the CCS completes the form, they will upload their copy that was emailed to them to the client attachments in LTSS Maryland. Copies of the completed form should also be sent to the participant and other team members as the participant chooses. Next slide. The CCS must also assign the participant's FMCS choice an effective date in LTSS Maryland. For participants currently self-directing, the referral must be made at least 30 days before the effective date. An FMCS training guide for self-direction has been created to support CCSs as they assign and reassign FMCS to participants. Next slide. Now, let's review the FMCS transfer process and what documents are needed. Next slide. During the 30 days before the FMCS transfer effective date, specific forms and documents need to be shared with the new FMCS. These documents help to support the setup and onboarding before the FMCS selection effective date. The participant, with the support of their team, must share the following documents with the new FMCS: their person-centered plan, their participant agreement, the family and staff form, their current self-directed budget sheet, any employee information, including wage rates, any wage exception forms, vendor forms, service implementation plans, employee vendor schedules, and any other documents to support the transfer and set up the participant and their employees, vendors, and providers with the new FMCS. Next slide. There will also be communication between the participant's current FMCS and their chosen one. The current agency will send the participant's newly chosen FMCS a list of payments and expenditures from the current plan and any tax information associated with the participant, their employees, and vendors. This includes the participant's employer identification number, or EIN. The new FMCS will orient the participant and their team to its processes and set up employees so that they're able to work. Next slide. Now we'll spend some time reviewing the updates to the SDS budget sheet. Next slide. The final step in open enrollment is to take action steps to transition to your chosen FMCS. Participants, with the support of their teams, must also create and send a new SDS budget sheet, including using the updated form, to their chosen FMCS. Information in the new budget sheet must match the current budget for all other services, number of hours and units, rates, and frequency. Next slide. The updated self-directed budget sheet form includes a drop-down option for plan type to note FMCS open enrollment, new automatic calculation of number of months and weeks from the effective date of the budget sheet to the annual plan date, a drop-down option to select the FMCS, and new boxes to note FMCS fees. The listing of number of employees and vendors has now been made optional. We have also removed the W codes from the SDS budget sheet. The codes are used for FMCS billing purposes and are not needed for the team to complete the budget. Next slide. Monthly fees for the FMCS will come from the participant's approved budget allocation. Remember, the budget allocation is based on traditional provider rates. One of the parts of the rates is called general and administrative cost. Examples of costs in this category include costs associated with confirming staff qualifications, paying employees, tax reporting, and accounting. These are some of the tasks that the FMCS does. Therefore, the service rates used in LTSS Maryland to create the self-directed budget allocation includes the cost for FMCS in each service. Next slide. Participants, with the support of their team, must create a budget that includes their FMCS fees from their approved funding. FMCS will not show up as an approved service in the LTSS Maryland PCP Detailed Service Authorization. However, FMCS agencies can be noted as a support in the PCP outcome, important 2 and 4, and focus area exploration sections of the PCP. Next slide. Let's take a look at how to complete the new SDS budget sheet during FMCS open enrollment. First, enter the participant's name. For PCP status, choose FMCS open enrollment. Write the participant's chosen effective date. That's the October 1 or January 1. Enter the participant's annual PCP implementation date. The budget sheet will calculate the number of months and weeks automatically. Choose the waiver the participant uses and then enter the approved DDA budget allocation from the DSA. That's beside the red arrow. Here is a screenshot of the effective date and implementation date entered into the calculations, and the calculations of weeks and months that are automatically totaled. Next slide. Next, choose the participant's FMCS from the drop-down menu. Include the rate per month listed on the FMCS fee table. Include the number of months until the annual plan date using the calculations from the budget sheet. Next slide. Here is the FMCS fee table. This is available on the DDA website, in our guidance, and through each FMCS. Next slide. Here is an example of how the FMCS should be included during open enrollment. You see that Jordan Doe has listed FMCS open enrollment as their PCP status. They've included an effective date to start with their new FMCS on October 1st, 2022. Their plan began on July 1st, 2022, so they will need 9 months of FMCS fees calculated. They list their chosen FMCS and note that it will charge Jordan $100 per month or a total of $900 for the year. Jordan and their team have already included their total budget allocation of $80,000. Next, they will mirror their current budget services and rates. For Jordan, the $900 for FMCS this year will come from their unallocated funds. Next slide. Most people will complete their budget sheets and use unallocated funds to pay for their FMCS fees. If a participant does not have enough unallocated funds, they must work with their team to move funding in their current budget to account for FMCS fees, or revise the PCP to include the July 2022 rates if the PCP was approved before July 1st, 2022. Next slide. If participants need to account for their FMCS from their current allocation, they will need to decrease other portions of their budget. Participants may choose to decrease the rates for some or all of their employees or vendors, benefits for some or all of their employees, mileage reimbursement rates or the number of miles in any or all services, and individual and family directed goods and services. It's important to remember that that does not include the recruitment portion of individual and family directed goods and services. Participants may not decrease the number of hours or units in the self-directed budget. Next slide. For participants who have a PCP that was approved before July 1st, they can revise their plan to include the July 1st updated rates. The rates will increase the total budget allocation. That increased budget allocation can be used to complete the new self-directed budget sheet. The new self-directed budget sheet should mirror the current budget sheet except for the FMCS fees. Now I'll pass it back to Rhonda to talk about updates related to the PCP and budget sheet process, timesheets, and invoices. Next slide.
Thank you, Kristi. So let's start talking about some updates to the person-centered planning process. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the person-centered planning process is always driven by the participant. The DDA approves services based on assessed needs as current practice. After participants transition to their new FMCS, the team will no longer send the SDS budget sheet, family of staff form, or wage exception form to the DDA in the PCP. These documents will be uploaded in LTSS and sent directly to the FMCS. The FMCS will review them to make sure they meet program standards, which are noted in the guidance we're providing today. Next slide, please. The self-directed budget sheet program standards for processing are included, as I mentioned, in the guidance. They include that the newly revised self-directed budget sheet is used. We have uploaded that on the DDA website, and it is referenced with today's date, and in parentheses, it has FMCS. The services must match services authorized in the PCP service authorization section. The service units match service units authorized in the PCP service authorization section. The wages, benefits, and rates must meet applicable federal, state, and local laws. For example, the minimum wage and sick and safe leave laws, as noted in Montgomery County, and DDA's established reasonable and customary standards. The budget sheet should reflect the FMCS and their fees, and the total self-directed budget sheet does not exceed the total budget allocation. Participants, with the support of their team, can use these standards as a checklist to ensure that it's complete prior to submitting to the FMCS. Next slide, please. This is a table that shows the updates to the PCP document submission once a person transitions to the new FMCS services. You'll see under documents submitted with the PCP process, we'll continue to include the participant agreement, rights and responsibilities, the service implementation plan, and other documents to support assessed need and as per DDA policy. Documents uploaded in LTSS and then submitted to the FMCS include the self-directed budget sheet, family of staff form, and wage exception form, if used, to be created by the team and again sent directly to the FMCS once the person transitions to the new FMCS. From now until August 1st, if a person has not transitioned to the new FMCS services, then all of these documents are required in the PCP submission, as has been practice. Next slide, please. So now we're going to start to talk about some updates related to the self-directed budget modification. Next slide, please. The self-directed budget sheet program standards for processing are also included in the guidance. FMCSs can process budget modification requests without DDA's authorization that meet standards noted in the guidance. FMCSs cannot process modifications that do not meet any of the standards. Again, participants, with the support of their team, can use these standards as a checklist to ensure things are complete prior to submitting to the FMCS. Next slide, please. The guidance will note these standards. First, the budget modification remains within the total approved annual budget amount. And the budget modification supports any of the following actions. The first one is it increases and decrease of staff wages or vendor provider rates within the reasonable and customary standards. Additions, increase, decrease or deletion of employee-related expenses associated with health benefits, paid time off, sick and safe leave, training, and transportation. Adjustments to funding associated with taxes. Changes to the use of staff to a vendor or provider or the same type and unit of services. Or changes from the use of a vendor or provider to hiring a staff for the same type and unit of services. Next slide. This slide continues the standards for the budget modification process. It includes funding allocation for backup staff for services authorized on the PCP and at the same level, increase of respite cap funding up to the waiver program service limit, currently set at $7,248, moving funding associated with the following meaningful day services, meaning employment services, ongoing job supports, community development services, and day hab, to increase or add to employment services, ongoing job supports, community development services, and day hab up to the total of combined 40 hours weekly. Currently, the waiver program provides meaningful day services up to 40 hours weekly. We wanted to provide the flexibility for people to be able to move their funding for their meaningful day services, as noted on this screen, to other meaningful day services, as noted, up to the 40-hour limits without having to do a revised plan. Next slide, please. And finally, for individual and family-directed goods and services, move funding for staff recruitment up to the 500 and provide up to the annual total of $5,000 for allowable goods and services under individual and family-directed goods and services, as noted in the DDA operated waivers, policies, and guidance. Please note that the approved waivers will specifically list allowable and not allowable items. As a reminder, the participant, with the support of their team, should use these standards as a checklist to ensure complete prior to sending their budget modification to the FMCS. This will help support immediate processing by the FMCS. Next slide, please. So now we're going to touch on some other updates that you're going to see in the guidance. Next slide, please. So one of the items on the self-directed services budget sheet and noted in the instruction guidance is for training. In their budget, participants may include costs for specific training. For example, first aid, CPR, certified medication technician, anchored job development training, and others. Additional training identified to support the delivery of services and supports can also be noted. You'll also see that we've added information to include the opportunity to put in the training line item, paying employees hourly rate and taxes for time and training. This is the updated guidance that will support paying staff for time while in training and also using other staff for direct support at the same time. Next slide, please. Another option is for staff travel and transportation in the budget sheet. Travel and mileage can be reimbursed when the employee is providing a direct DDA funded services to the person. Travel and transportation is based on where the participant lives, works, shops, and regularly schedules their days. For those in bordering states or near bordering states, out-of-state travel can be reimbursed but must meet the same requirements, meaning it's in places where the person lives, works, shops, and regularly spends their day. We know we have people on the border of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, so we want to make sure we provide that opportunity for them to be able to support transportation in their community. Please note that travel and transportation for vacations cannot be reimbursed. Next slide, please. To continue with travel and transportation, participants may allocate funding for the use of public transportation. They may reimburse their employees for mileage for use of the employee's vehicle. And the update today is that people may reimburse a person who is not employed by the participant for transportation if it is related to the participant's person-centered plan authorized services. Mileage reimbursement rates. Participants may reimburse up to the federal standard mileage rate. Participants can also use the Maryland state reimbursement rate. Recently, the federal government standards were increased mid-year. Therefore, we're sharing today, if the rate goes up during the plan year, participants can choose to pay the higher rate. You can do that with the budget modification process. If the rate goes down during the plan year, the higher rate can be paid until the end of the plan year. Next slide, please. Another line item is paid time off. Participants can choose to offer their employees paid time off or PTO. If offered, it is important for employees to use during the plan year. Time off for work has many health benefits, like improved productivity, lower stress, and better mental health for the employees. Note that the FMCS cannot pay out paid time off or any other leave benefits at the end of a participant's plan year or upon the termination or resignation of an employee. Next slide, please. It is also important for participants and their teams to make sure that they get documentation of service delivery from their staff, vendors, and providers as required by the DDA programs. FMCSs are required to conduct quality reviews of self-directed services invoices and timesheets. They will process timesheets and invoices after they confirm the DDA programs are met. For example, for environmental modifications to be paid or reimbursed, the participant and team must require the vendor to invoice in at least 3 installments that are paid for and agreed upon project milestones. It is important to make sure that the quality of the work is to the participant's satisfaction for the modification that was being conducted to the home. It is also important to ensure that the vendor that provided the service, the environmental modification, is licensed and bonded and has insurance. Another example is for support broker invoices and timesheets to be paid. A timesheet with key information such as dates, times of service, and the description of supports should be provided. The department is going to be working with the FMCSs to propose standard requirements across all FMCSs. This will help participants and their teams when and if they transfer fiscal management and counseling services providers. Next slide, please. And then the next update is related to electronic visit verification. Maryland is required by the federal government to use electronic visit verification for personal supports and respite care services under the self-directed service model. Each FMCS will also be sharing with participants information to follow the requirements of EVV. The FMS agency will make sure participants, employees, and other team members understand the EVV rules. They will provide an easy-to-use and understandable way to clock in and out in approved time. Participants and their teams should learn about the FMCS EVV system during the open enrollment and selection process. That may help in terms of their decisions related to their choice of FMCS. These updates that we've been sharing and additional information is all noted in our guidance. I am now going to turn it back over to Kristi. Next slide, please.
We know we've presented a lot of information today. We want to continue the conversation with you by hosting weekly lunch and learns to discuss the FMCS transition more. Next slide. Over the next several weeks, the DDA will host lunch and learns on Fridays from 12 to 1. We want to know from you what topics should be prioritized and covered, so we will conduct a poll after some question and answers. The poll will also ask some questions about today's webinar. We'll leave the poll up for an additional 5 minutes after the webinar ends to allow time for you to complete it. Next slide.
And so this slide has links to resources that have been posted to the DDA website. You'll see under self-directed budgets that we've noted the DDA self-directed budget sheet revised July 21st, 2022 with FMCS edition. This means this is the budget sheet to use that will include the FMCS provider and their fees. We've also included and uploaded to the DDA website instructions for the DDA self-directed budget sheet revised 2021 with the FMCS additions. So this instruction sheet is specific to the newly revised form. On our website, we continue to have the previous self-directed budget sheet and instruction form for those people who have not transitioned between now and August 1st for new people, and those people who are transitioning later. Resources and tools also include the link to the new DDA Fiscal Management Counseling Service webpage. On that webpage, there are links to information about the different agencies. We've also included link to open enrollment that you can navigate directly from the website. We've also included the recent communication that was shared out in terms of the memo about fiscal management counseling services, in addition to the department letter for provider onboarding and open enrollment. Again, just want to reinforce the importance of considering attending our information fairs. As Kristi shared today, we are offering both virtual and in-person fairs in August and October. The August dates are available in this PowerPoint and on our website. And then again, we'll be providing additional information related to the DDA lunch and learns. So Donna, why don't we go ahead and do the poll first, and then we'll start to look through some of the questions so that we make sure people can see some of the transparency of that. So if you could execute the poll, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, the first one. Are you attending today's webinar as, well, you can check the one that applies to you. I self-direct my services. I'm a family member. I'm a self-directed provider. I am a support broker. I am a coordinator of community services. And we'll keep it open. It looks like half of you have voted. So we'll just keep it open a little bit longer.
That's good.
Okay, we're going to close the poll. 60% have voted. And we're going to share. 2% said I self-direct my services. 24% said I'm a family member. 6% said I am a self-directed provider. 10% said I'm a support broker. And 58% said I'm a CCS. So thank you for that one. We got poll number 2 coming up. Okay, let us know what you think about today's training. So the choices there are, it was clear and informative, it was good, I learned a few things, neutral, or it was not helpful. And it looks like 60% have voted. And we're going to close it at 70%. And share. So 32% said it was clear and informative. 45% said it was good. I learned a few things. 21% were neutral, and 3% said it was not helpful. All right, poll number 3 is coming up. How useful was this webinar? And there's 3 responses for that. Extremely useful, somewhat useful, or not useful at all. And it looks like 70% voted. So we're going to close the poll and share. 38% said extremely useful, 60% said somewhat useful, and 2% said not useful. All right, poll number 4. Rank what topic you would like to hear more about for Lunch and Learn. And the choices there are choice, open enrollment, and information about, and I can't see the rest of it. The second response is choice form, service, referrals, and transfer. The third response is self-direction, person-centered planning. The fourth is self-direction, budget sheet, and modifications. And then 9%, or then the final one is other. And I think it says specify, which you can't do that in this particular poll. But if you would like to add something to that, you can go ahead and put it in your question box. Any feedback you have would work well in the question box. So I'm going to close this. It looks like 60% have voted. And share. So we have 28% said choice, open enrollment, and other information. 10% said choice form, service referrals, and transfer. 16% said self-direction, person-centered planning, and 38% said self-direction, budget sheet, and modifications. 9% said other. And the last poll is coming up. So are you or the person you support receiving I can't see the rest of it.
And Donna, it says, are you or the person you support receiving services through DDA? Please select yes or no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it looks like 65% have voted. I'm going to close that one. Share. So it looks like 81% said yes and 19% said no. So thank you for participating in the polls. And
thank you, Donna, for doing that. And as Donna mentioned, if you've got other training topics you want to put in the questions of the chat, that would be great. We can grab those. And if you want to know which ones you would like us to prioritize first, that'll be helpful too. So let's go through some of the questions we have. So the first question we had was, what is the duration of each of the FMCS contracts with DDA? So the contracts we have, I believe, are for a 5-year period, and you saw that in the monthly fees for the 5 years that is noted there. The next question is, what occurs if the annual plan date is within choice period? Won't this cause duplication of work? Kristi, you want to help us with that one?
What occurs if the annual plan date is within the choice period? Yeah, so if during open enrollment people are ready to write a new budget, they can use the new budget sheet to write a new budget for the entire 12 months. But keep in mind that the effective date is either October 1st or January 1st. So keep in mind when you have that effective date, it is going to matter to the number of months you have an FMCS fee. I'm not sure that made a lot of sense. Rhonda, can you maybe explain it?
Sure. So, you know, if the annual plan, so if you're currently self-directing services, and let's say your annual plan is due August 1st, you're going to do your annual plan and include all the required documents, including the self-directed budget sheet, the family and staff wage exception with the PCP. So you're going to continue that process. The person would also be exploring who they'd like to select for the FMCS. That will become effective October 1st or January 1st. We do know that the majority of the people self-directing generally have their services and their plans in July. So we believe most of them have already been completed. But in the event that an annual plan occurs between now and the October selection or the January selection, then you would complete that plan. And as Kristi says, when the selection has been made and the transition is occurring for the new FMCSs, then when you create that budget sheet, you would note the FMS fees for the number of months remaining to the next annual plan year. And she showed that in the examples today. So that was a good question. The next question we have was, families still have not been trained on how to complete the service implementation plan. Will a training be offered to them soon? Great question. We can absolutely put that in our lunch and learns and talk about that. We know coordinators of community services have been working with participants and teams to support that. And there is a policy on the DDA website. When you go to the main page, there's a banner at the top called Policy Stat you can click on. And there's a specific policy on service implementation plan that can provide some information. But we'll definitely add that to an item for our lunch and learns. Kristi, our next question is, do the plan and budget need to be sent from DDA to the new FMCS?
That's a great question. I think this question has to do with open enrollment. So I can kind of clarify some things. So during open enrollment, when the team completes a new budget sheet with those new FMCS fees in the chosen FMCS, that goes directly to the chosen FMCS. And the FMCS team will review it to make sure it meets program standards. So like Rhonda shared with our new person-centered planning process, with open enrollment, there will be no change to the person-centered plan unless people are changing those July 1st rates. But other than that, there will be no change to that, and it will just be the budget sheet, and the DDA will not be receiving that, the FMCS as well.
Great, thank you. And Kristi, can you share, is it required to add the FMCS in the outcomes or focus areas?
It's a good idea too. I think it's an important part of the conversation when the team is meeting to develop the PCP, to talk about how the FMCS will support them to meet their goals, especially in regards to how they will continue to pay their employees and their vendors. I think it's a great idea too.
Yeah, absolutely, because our person-centered plans, we want to be holistic. We want to know both DDA funded services and supports, but also other resources and programs in addition to other natural and community type support. So, you know, as person-centered plans are being created and you're looking at the outcome section and what and supports and what's important for the person, those were areas where you might want to look at, you know, noting the FMCS and their importance. Okay, the next question is, what if the individual doesn't have enough unallocated funds to cover the FMCS fees? And so that's a good question. That came in early before Kristi went over information and guidance related to if there's a lack of unallocated funds. So people can do budget modifications or budget move funding in their budget to be able to support that. In addition, we've noted that a revised PCP can be completed if a plan has not been completed prior to July 1st. Creating that revised plan will pull in the new July rates, which then will increase the overall total budget allocation and provide additional funding there. Okay, this looks like a duplicate. Let me see. So question about, what about plans that were in the process prior to July 1st that did not have the newer rates, support broker, housing support services, nursing, et cetera? How do we increase those rates? So that's a really good question, and the DDA has provided guidance. We did a webinar in May about reasonable and customary rates and the increase. That is available on our website on the dedicated self-directed services guidance forms and webinar page. In that guidance, you'll see where we provided information about the process to complete a revised plan if needed. Kristi did share today that most people have unallocated funding available to them, but in the event that they need additional services or funding to support that FMCS, then a revised plan can be completed. Kristi, next question is, where do the documents get uploaded that are no longer required for the PCP submission? Client attachments, question mark?
A great question. Those do need to be submitted to the FMCS.
And they do need to be uploaded into LTSS, right? And so we put in the guidance that you can upload that in the client attachments. Feel free if you've got them and you want to include them with the PCP, but please note the DDA's review of the PCP and our authorization is specific to the authorized services based on assessed need, and we will not be reviewing self-directed budget sheets once the person has transitioned to the FMCSs. So please refer to the guidance. It tells you where to put it. It also provides information about the category to select. In LTSS, we have a new category for FMCS documents, and it also provides information about file names to be used. So I know that we are at 1:59, and I believe our Deputy Secretary is on the line, so I wanted to see, Bernie, if there was any closing statements that you would like to add related to our excitement and opportunities with FMCSs or the webinar today.
Thanks, Rhonda. Yeah, I think this is great. We had a great turnout. We had well over 300 and something individuals participating. I want to thank you for your feedback, and again, we look forward to hearing from you with what any additional topics that you're interested in for the lunch and learn. Thank you.
Great, thank you again, and we'll look forward to sharing some information about those lunch and learns and registration. And again, please note in the questions or the chat topics that you feel you'd like us to focus on and any priorities. We'll leave the question box open for the next 5 minutes so that you have an opportunity to add any additional questions or information in there and suggestions for our lunch and learn. So thank you, stay safe, and have a great day.